Hey guys, I'm going to take a few minutes to walk you through a paragraph organizational device that I'm going to have you use throughout the remainder of this semester. I've mentioned it in class a few times before. It's called the M.E.A.L plan. It's from Duke University and it stands for Main Idea, Evidence, Analysis, and Link. I have a longer video in the writing workshop module that goes through this M.E.A.L plan in a lot of detail. So you're always welcome to check out that particular video to get even more acquainted with this particular strategy or technique. But here in this video, I'm going to go through it rather quickly, and I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what you see on the screen right now. And then I'm going to take you to one of the sample essays from the comparative article analysis module and show you how we can see the parts of the M.E.A.L plan in action in one of the body paragraphs in that essay. So the page that you're looking at is again actually in the writing workshop module. It's a discussion of the M.E.A.L plan, actually part 2 of a 2-part discussion of the M.E.A.L plan. And what I've done is I've taken an essay that I use sometimes as an example of a classical or Aristotelian argument that has a specific structure to it, including presentation of the main idea or thesis, the core argument basically in the argument, as well as the opposition. That's what an Aristotelian argument involves, is looking at both the supporting argument, the main argument, but then also addressing the opposition and refuting it. And so I use that often, especially in my research and argument composition classes. But what's additionally nice about this essay, aside from the fact that it's a really good model for that particular type of argument, is that she uses essentially the M.E.A.L plan organizational strategy for her body paragraphs. So taking a look at this paragraph, you'll see that I've highlighted it in various ways to reflect the parts that the M.E.A.L plan represents. Basically, the M.E.A.L plan works in a very simple way. The very first sentence of your body paragraph should always be structured in such a way that the main idea of the paragraph is clearly identified or articulated. Essentially, the main idea sentence is like a mini thesis for your paragraph. It's also a way to think of the opening sentence as a kind of topic sentence as to establishing the purpose or function of the paragraph. The basic idea, really, regardless of what you call the first sentence of your paragraph, is that it must identify very clearly what the purpose of that paragraph is. And if your paragraph is making a particular claim or working through a specific supporting idea next to your thesis statement, then you need to make very clear what that claim or idea actually is right out the gate in the very first sentence. And make sure too that your topic sentence or main idea sentence, again, whatever you call it, is not just making a general observation or stating something like, I'm going to talk about this in this paragraph. It needs to make a claim of some sort. So as you can see in the sample, I have highlighted in bold what that claim is, or what the major idea behind this particular paragraph is. And then as you look more closely, and I would recommend that you pause and just look closely at this paragraph, you'll notice that I've done a couple of other things. I've underlined the 2 pieces of evidence that the author is working with in this paragraph. M.E.A.L plan usually needs you to use at least a couple of pieces of evidence to help make your argument for that particular paragraph. So keep that in mind. One of the things is you're building your paragraphs using the M.E.A.L plan structure, is you should have at least 2 pieces of evidence or 2 examples to help you justify or defend what you're saying. And each of those pieces of evidence or examples should be accompanied by an analysis of that evidence or example. And that's what you see in blue on the screen there. That is the author analyzing or working through what the evidence or the example that she's provided is telling us or revealing. So that's another part to the M.E.A.L plan. That's the A, is analysis. And then at the very end in green, you see what is essentially the link back to the main idea of the paper itself. In other words, the thesis statement. So that's the M.E.A.L plan really quickly explained, and I'm going to show you very quickly again how we can see it at work in one of the sample comparative article analysis essays that we have in that module. So let's go take a look at that next. Okay, so I've opened up the essay that is a comparative analysis of the two articles on white supremacy and violence, the essays by Gloria Steinem and Kathleen Belew. I'm on the second page of the article, or of the essay, pardon me, where I'm moving from the summarization of each of the two articles and the arguments that those articles make. And now I'm moving towards, in the fourth paragraph, the beginning of my comparative analysis between the two. And this is where I want to take a quick look, or explain again, how the M.E.A.L plan is a really good model for organizing your paragraphs and making sure that in each of your body paragraphs, you're doing everything that you really need to do to make a strong, well-developed body paragraph. So as you can see, we're at the bottom of page 2, and this is the paragraph we're concerning ourselves with here. It's the one right at the bottom. And how it starts is me identifying a point of agreement between Belew and Steinem about the shared topic that they're exploring. So I use that point of agreement to articulate and establish the main idea for that particular paragraph. So as you can see, the very first sentence fits the M in the M.E.A.L plan, the main idea. And what I've identified here is that they both agree that there is a clear relationship between the instances of mass violence in this country, especially gun-related violence, and notions of white supremacy. So I point out that important area of agreement between the two authors. And then what I need to do next is I need to supply evidence for what I'm talking about. In other words, I need to pull from these two articles examples from them to show that this is what they're talking about, that this is something they are clearly in agreement about. So the next thing that I'll do, and you'll actually see between the two things that are highlighted on this particular paragraph, that I also point out something else that they share in common, that they agree that the latter, the idea of white supremacy, can actually lead to the former. It's not only that there's a relationship between the two, but that one actually causes or leads to the other. So I kind of elaborate a little bit on my main idea that I first introduced in the opening sentence of that paragraph. And sometimes you might need to do that as well, especially if you're working with a rather complicated idea. However, what I do next is where we start to see kind of two things, actually. What is different between the two articles, because this is the comparative article analysis where I'm asking people to identify points of comparison and contrast, but this is also where I start to identify and work through some of the things that I need to kind of do to elaborate on the main idea that I've opened the paragraph with. So that third sentence is where I identify one of the things that is different between the two, but again, how that relationship, the things that they share in common, or the thing that they agree with, what else we see is important in terms of connecting them. In other words, again, I'm giving evidence, I'm supplying examples, and talking a bit about what that example or what that information actually means. As I continue in the paragraph, I supply some more information. Since again, part of my goal is to identify points of comparison and contrast, I continue to identify pieces of evidence from each of the articles that shows what they're doing with this particular point, this particular idea, and especially what they're saying is different, or especially what I'm noticing is different or similar between the two in relation to what they're saying about that point about white supremacy and violence. Now, as I come to a wrap up, as you see in this very last sentence, I talk about some of the examples of mass violence and how those kind of come together within that larger concern of violence and white supremacy. So I bring it back to where we've started. In other words, I've created a link. So again, thinking about how you can create your paragraphs in a very thoughtful way is to structure them using those 4 parts, and being very mindful again that you not only supply a main idea at the opening of your paragraph and a link back to your main thesis at the end of your paragraph, but in between those two things, to supply at least 2 very strong and clear, also very distinct pieces of evidence or examples that help you to clarify the main idea you've just introduced at the beginning of your paragraph, as well as analyze what those pieces of evidence actually mean. In other words, you work through, discuss, and explore what we learn or what we can take away from the evidence that you've supplied. So this is just a starting point to thinking more about the M.E.A.L plan, and hopefully by the end of the semester you'll feel pretty comfortable using this as a organizational device for your body paragraphs. But for now, think about it in relation to just getting those ideas started and organized in hopefully a really productive and very clear way.